All right, welcome everybody back to another Big Doug and Carmi episode. Our guest today from NFL Network is Eric Edholm. Eric, thanks for coming back on. Always enjoy our time chatting football with you, buddy.
Always good to hop on with you guys. What's happening?
Football, you know it. McCarthy Pro Day today. Did I missed the numbers? Did anybody see the numbers for him today? Did he test or no?
I would guess not. I think he did most of the stuff at the combine, so I don't know for sure. But I can't speak to that. I was texting some other guys about a different pro day earlier, but I haven't heard back.
Okay, well, I wish we'd be talking about something other than quarterbacks because it feels like that's all we've done is talk about quarterbacks. But here we are with the number 2 pick for the Commanders. We've got to talk about quarterbacks. In the area, Eric made some waves the other day when you were on with Grant and Danny. Said maybe a buddy or two had told you that they heard Jaden Daniels. Obviously, we're super early in the process. We haven't even had pro days for some of these guys. So
Yep.
To say who the Commanders will or won't take, I think we can't do. But I am curious about the process of sourcing these things out.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Yeah, no, I mean, that's the thing, especially when you have a new regime, and it's not all from the same group, right? I mean, this is an arranged marriage of sorts, and not that that's a bad thing either, but yeah, I mean, you end up, and I think one of the big things you'll see oftentimes a new GM takes over, new head coach, what have you. They kind of go on lockdown. They're like, all right, no leaks are getting out. We're not going to talk. Nobody's going to be quoted saying anything. No one's going to be whispering to anybody. Everything gets funneled through me, whatever it might be. And so there was a lot of people I saw pushing back on Twitter, and I didn't really have the mental stamina to deal with every one of them. But basically saying everyone knows Peters isn't talking. This is just BS. This is somebody talking out of their what. And to a degree, they're right. I mean, I haven't gotten anything directly from Washington. Lips have been sealed there, so that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. What I will say is that it still matters what the perception is league-wide. Mm-hmm. And if you don't think the other 31 teams, especially for one that's picking in the top 3 picks where quarterbacks are flying off the board or expected to, they want to know what teams are doing. And of course, word does get out, whether they think it does or not, because who you bring in for interviews, who you talk to extensively at the Combine or Senior Bowl or any other event along the calendar, there's always going to be little leaks that happen. And you'd be surprised. Like, these teams have a better feel for how things are going to go. Not always, but they work their sources too. And so why wouldn't I talk to them? Why wouldn't I get a feel for what the league thinks the Commanders are doing, or the Patriots are doing at 3, or any of those other key spots in the draft?
Gotcha.
Let's start with the quarterbacks. Which ones do you like? How do you have them ranked personally, Eric?
I love them all. No, I don't know that I love them all, but it is a good year. It's a good class to kind of sit back and weigh the different strengths and weaknesses. And, I may not have Caleb Williams as some once in a generation prospect, but he is my top guy. I mean, I've loved him since the minute he took over for Rattler. And I mean, I still remember that game. He's in a 2 touchdown hole and he just digs him out of it. And every throw is more impressive than the next. And he's scrambling. And it's funny because they'd kind of used him as a sort of a design runner before that. I mean, he can do that obviously, but we've seen him evolve as a passer. And I think even with some tape last year that led to some concerns, I still have him number 1. I like Drake May a lot, and I think he's going to be very good down the road. But, the sense that I've gotten from people, again, not necessarily in Washington, not necessarily, one team's view, but the general view is that he's going to need a little time to get up to speed, and you may not want to force him in to your lineup right away. We've seen teams do this approach, but there were some conceptual things that probably aren't going to translate as much, even with some air raid coaches like Cliff Kingsbury and whatnot populating the league. There's just going to be a lot of stuff that he hasn't been exposed to protection-wise and scheme-wise. That's going to be a little bit different. So that's the sense I've gotten, is that, like, people like him a lot, but that there's also some reservation as far as what he might be able to do as a potential rookie week 1 or early season type of starter. With Daniels from LSU, Jaden Daniels, I mean, he's been in college football since 2019. I mean, he's had some experience. He was at Arizona State for 3 years, went through the highs and lows there, goes to LSU, new head coach, had to win his job. I mean, people kind of forget that, but he was in a competition where, weeks before the opening game and we didn't know if he was going to even start for them. So he took his game to a new level. Great deep passer, great scrambler. I don't think he's quite as good in the pocket as some of the other guys, but he'll make people miss, obviously, and buy time and use his athleticism. So there's a lot to like there. His running ability should give him a nice floor as a rookie where he can get himself out of tough spots. I would probably put I have JJ McCarthy as the next guy on my top 100 list, and I get why people like him, but I also have my reservations. And it's, people have pointed out, like, why wouldn't he be throwing the ball more at Michigan, even if they have a great run game? That I'm not as concerned about, but middle of the field accuracy is not exactly his. Outside of the middle of the field. I mean, on the edges, the perimeter of the field is not exactly his strength. He's had some great throws outside the numbers, but, still putting the ball where it needs to be. I suspect he'll always be a player whose stats make him appear worse than he is, but his potential team success could make him appear better than he is, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Decent tangibles, very good intangibles, and will probably be a coach's dream from a temperament standpoint. I mean, they raved about his leadership there, so that gives him an edge. I have Penix over Nix, if that matters to you guys. I don't know. We'll get it may not matter to Commanders fans at some point, but even with the injuries, I think I'd be willing to take a risk on him versus reaching for Bo Nix and what I view as a more limited ceiling or a limited skill set overall.
Eric, to that end, I feel like the quarterbacks have been skyrocketing up the draft board. And, I don't know if it's like projections over the years or kind of like because of 2025, there's a perceived, weaker QB class next year. But, Jaden Daniels coming into the season was a projected 3rd or 4th round pick. JJ McCarthy was projected 2nd round pick, and now he's flying up the draft boards. Do you think that's I guess what I'm trying to work around is that just a QB overvaluation? Do you think this is, a high risk position to select, or how do you feel about this overall draft class? And do you think, what's your overall thoughts on that? I feel like JJ McCarthy could potentially be a top 5 pick, and do you agree with that as well?
Yeah, he could be QB3, right?
Okay.
And for every quarterback that is like a Caleb Williams or a Trevor Lawrence or whoever, who enters the season as the prohibitive favorite to be the first quarterback pick, for every one of those guys, there are 4 or 5 who either move up or down significantly from where we project them, right? I mean, I think a lot of people are even talking about maybe Quinn Ewers before the season, and maybe he'll be great next year. We don't know, but he's back in school, and Shadur Sanders is back in school, and there are a number of other guys that were wild cards there. But yeah, I mean, it's the sort of car wash theory of, you can either, the longer you watch them, you either talk yourself into them or out of them. But more often, these guys are going to be trending upward, with the rare exceptions of guys like Brock Purdy. He starts 40-something games in college and barely gets drafted and things like that. So those instances do happen, of course. And, what was Dak Prescott, the 9th or 10th quarterback taken in that class? It's pretty unbelievable. But again, those are the exceptions to the rule more often than not. And the need of the position is obviously the trump card, if you will. That's kind of what pushes them over the top. And so, that's why, Mac Jones and Justin Fields and Trey Lance and that whole draft class, Zach Wilson. I don't even think Zach has a team yet, right? I mean,
yeah.
It is wild to think about. Now, that COVID year was a little different than everything else, but there are plenty of instances throughout history where we've seen the gradual building up of prospects, and then we look back 3 years later and say, what were we thinking? And so I think it's just the nature of the position and the desperation to get a lottery ticket, a chance at getting one.
I was going to say to that end, sorry to interrupt you, Doug, but
you're good.
So to that end, do you feel like NFL teams are more willing to take a risk at a quarterback like in the first round? Because it just seems like it's almost like a dart throw now. And with the rookie pay scale, it's almost like not necessarily even that big of a risk, right? You're starting to see these like quarterbacks being rinsed and repeated, like, Justin Fields and, talk about Zach Wilson, Mac Jones being traded within a couple of years. Do you think it's like teams are just more prone to try it for 3 years? If it doesn't work, try it again a couple of years later? Or what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think there's there've been some GMs throughout history who understood the value of the position, and I think back to like Ron Wolf even in the 90s, and he was always drafting quarterbacks, even though he had Brett Favre and then later had Aaron Rodgers. They were always doing that because they felt like, we can trade an Aaron Brooks for more than he's actually worth, or we can trade a Matt Hasselbeck, and get something out of it, develop him on the side. And so, on some level that's always existed, but I definitely think with the new CBA, the most recent one, the current structure of the pay scale is that these guys are getting paid less than some backup quarterbacks would, veteran backups. So, there's something to be said for that. And that's how you're allowed to spend, like for instance, the Texans give Daniil Hunter a 2-year, $48 million or no, 56. I can't remember the exact number, but a really healthy contract where they say, well, we have CJ. That's why we can do it. And there are obviously a million instances of that. So I think that's a big part of it, but also the fact that if you do hit on one of these guys, it's more likely that you're going to hit on them at the top of the draft than you are with the Brock Purdy or the Dak Prescotts and whatnot. So
makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of why teams are so enamored with a position that is built in with a high failure rate.
How frustrated are NFL coaches? I'm thinking about the two where they get their players from. So, like in baseball, you can develop guys.
Yeah,
get them going in the league. College football is oddly enough such a wildly different sport almost than professional football that most of these guys don't come in ready because they're not running the same kind of offense. They won't be expected to do the same thing. They certainly won't be looking off boards of pictures on the sideline. Like, it's a financial thing. I'm assuming that the NFL won't put together some sort of league that can help develop these guys. So now we're not throwing them out there on bad teams and then wondering why they can't be successful, right? Like, how do we fix the problem? And we don't have time, right? I mean,
right. Yeah.
Years to get it done, or else the head coach, GM, and the quarterback are all out.
Oh, those are great questions. And it's one of those things that is frustrating. Like, the NBA for years didn't have that developmental league, and now they do. And I think there are enough success stories to where you say, aha, okay, there is something to this. You can bring a player up, bring them back. There are rules involved. I don't know all of them. I don't follow the NBA quite as thoroughly as I do the NFL, but obviously baseball being the gold standard from years ago, even if they have dialed back a lot of the minor league development stuff. But yes, these conversations have absolutely been in the backgrounds of scouting and coaching and development circles for years. And it's a numbers problem. Number one, you can't necessarily have 32 minor league teams all playing against each other and have the operational costs for all those players, most of whom aren't going to be on your roster per se. So there's been talk about like merging teams and teams share rosters, but what if you have a quarterback and you're like, aha, I want to get my quarterback some work. We're going to send him down to the taco eaters for the next few months. And they're going to, he's going to be great. Well, we already have a quarterback on the taco eaters. That's this guy right over here. There would be some barriers to it. I think that logistically just wouldn't work. But I think the dream is for one of these offshoot leagues, these that have sprung up and died off and whatever. I think they want to let it kind of establish itself and get some kind of footing, and then kind of work out a deal to either purchase it or merge with it and use that as the feeder system. Because like you said, college football, you're at the mercy of what they're doing. offensively and defensively, and
Right, they're trying to win game. All they want to do is win games too, right?
You're trying to save your job as a college coach. You're not going to say,
Yeah, right.
you know what, I should probably run some more NFL stuff. I mean, it doesn't really,
Yeah.
I don't think it works that way. So
We've seen more this year, Eric, I think ever before, the casual fan getting into analytics. And I'm curious kind of how, there it is.
Nice. I love it.
We're seeing more and more, pressure to sack rate is the big thing.
Right.
This year. Pressure to sack rate on third down, I saw the other day, which was kind of a cool stat. Where do we marry what we see on the tape and some of these analytic numbers where it feels like over time they're now becoming sticky so we can kind of believe them a little bit more?
Yeah.
Where's the value in the middle?
Well, I mean, it's for fans, it's great because if you start sort of looking at it and drilling down on a certain position, let's say pressure rate or whatever you're talking about there, and you say, well, this guy's got a 5% higher than this projected first round pick. What are we doing here, right? So it's easy to it's a number. It's got a tangible value to it. You say, aha, I've found it. I've noticed it a lot in college basketball too, especially with the transfer portal and guys switching from, not to, to get into a whole other conversation, but I jumped into one of these college basketball, and I'm an old school guy. I grew up with the Big East, watching Georgetown, St. John's on a Monday night, but I don't even recognize the sport anymore. And I certainly don't recognize the discussions about the sport. So yeah, it's really amazing to see what that, this whole cottage industry that's sprung up both on the media side and on the team side. And I realize there's some overlap there too. How these numbers have changed both positively and negatively how the NFL draft and scouting works. And I think teams are smarter about avoiding, those outlier situations where you say, hey, he had 18 sacks at FSU last year, but he's only 235 pounds, right? We can't, this is not going to work, right? I mean, or he's only doing this in his explosion drills. Like he would have to be 95th percentile or higher, and here he is sitting at 75. That's not going to work for us. And it becomes this sort of multifactorial evaluation that doesn't always work, but I think it helps you kind of slim down your possibilities and look for the traps that exist in scouting. And I mean, I don't, more information is what I've always been told.
Absolutely.
Like, what does it do for you? It's more information. It gives a bigger picture. It fills in some of the little details. And, I use it a lot for like where people line up on the field, that kind of data tracking. I think that's very valuable. I don't look at like PFF grades, no offense to them. I don't want to be skewed by a system that I don't understand. I don't know how they come about their numbers, but if you can show me a number that I can easily like, all right, I get how they got that number. There's no gray area. Then I'll absolutely use it and try to apply it in a way that's, not too reliant on the film is always the most important stuff. Who's he playing against? What were the conditions? What was happening on the field? And the numbers can kind of help streamline that a little bit, but I do worry, like you said, about it being too much of a crutch.
Eric, to that end, I was kind of doing some research before we had our podcast. I noticed you wrote about Caleb Williams' pro day and Marvin Harrison sitting out during the combine and potentially not having a pro day as well.
Yeah.
Speaking of more information, is there valuable information to draw from a pro day, or is it more just kind of like a glorified business interview? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, for some of these guys, it's like you have to, they feel like you have to kind of play ball and go by these rules. And hey, why does Marvin Harrison think he's better than this? And then I think a lot of them understand that Marvin Harrison's a 1%er, man. Like as far as talent goes, right? I mean, like I mean that in a good way.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we know
he's top of the hill. Like, what's he gonna do that? See, I saw him run that dig route there at pro day. I didn't see him. It can be helpful if you're like Caleb, for instance, the other day. Yeah, everything was in the pocket. It was a script that won't look like any game tape he's had. I've had. We've had other quarterbacks who've done similar things where it's like, all right, what are the questions on me that I can't hit the deep out? All right, we're going to run, a deep out. And we're going to have it 17 yards and we're going to do it. We're going to show you that we can do it.
Mhm.
Does that mean he can do it in a game? Probably not, but it shows a little bit of competitiveness and a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. And it shows that at least they have the arm strength to make the throw, and we'll decide later if we're going to use that. So, I mean, for guys on the Caleb, Marvin, Malik Neighbors level, what are you going to do? Pout about it? They're still going to be great pros, probably. More, I would be willing to bet on all three of those guys showing exceptional ability at some point or another in the NFL. If you have players who are a little bit farther down the food chain, who are, if this trend continues where it's like, aha, that guy opted out of this and that, I might be able to do it too. It will hurt some guys. So the more you see of it outside of that top 1%, I don't necessarily think it's beneficial. But then again, we talk about more information with the stats, the analytics. Who's the most hyped quarterback going right now? Like, we talk about Caleb and we talk about it's JJ McCarthy, the guy who's thrown the least of all these guys. I always use this example, and maybe it's overkill, but in the draft that had Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson, both started for 2+ seasons. The Bears saw more in 14 games of Mitch Trubisky than they did in 29 games or 36 games, respectively, of Mahomes and Watson. Sometimes the lack of information leads teams to reaching. Yeah. So, I mean, it can benefit the players and hurt the teams, but it's fascinating to think about it in those terms.
How do you kind of juxtapose? We also hear, I think the other cliche words we hear are floor and ceiling, right? Like,
yep,
we can get in Jaden Daniels right now with his running. If he's having some of the other problems, we can start there. So in Drake Mays, we see this vision of what he could be someday, but it might not be right now. Where do you have to kind of get at where you got to win games now? We know that, but do you miss out on a guy that may be significantly better in a couple of years? I mean, how do we get from one spot to the other, floor to ceiling?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it depends on the team. You mentioned it, like you have to win games. Well, we know that, but in the case of a team like Washington, just starting there, I don't think anyone has expectations that they need to like if they don't make a run to the playoffs, what are they going to do? Fire again? Of course not. So that's the kind of team that can sit back and say, who's our favorite quarterback? Who do we like the best? Like, who do we think will be the best when we look back in the draft 5 years from now at the end of a rookie contract? Who will look smart? And they're going to have their choice, but everybody but one. So with this deep a quarterback class, they can sit back, take their time, pour through the tape, look at the numbers, interview the skin off these guys, right? I mean, until they're blue in the face, and find out who wins the Survivor Challenge of this. And that's the beauty of it. Whereas, a team like New England, bad example. That's a bad one. Team like, let's say, Minnesota, that is a candidate to trade up into that top 5 range to draft either May or McCarthy or whoever. I don't know that they're in that spot. I think there's a certain pressure. Not only are you paying a premium to move up, but you also have to get it right and have this guy be ready kind of quickly, even though you have Sam Darnold. I mean, like, even though they won 13 games 2 years ago, if they have another weird season, there's no guarantee that Kevin O'Connell has his job back, and that's just the nature of the league. I'm not picking on Kevin. I think he's a bright young coach, but
very sharp, yeah.
But I'm just saying, like, that's kind of how it goes. Yeah, you have good year, 2 bad years, you're potentially on the chopping block, and that's gonna have an impact on. It's gonna slim down your quarterback pool if you're a quarterback needy team, I think. So I would rather be in a situation. Well, they're picking higher, it's a better catbird seat, but I would rather be in Washington's situation than in a team like Denver, Minnesota, possibly the Raiders, other quarterback needy teams out there that almost have to say, well, we like this guy. We like Drake May, but we don't know he's going to be ready on our timetable. I don't think we can do that. that to me is putting yourself in a corner a little bit.
Yeah, so Eric, to that end, do you see like Jaden Daniels and Derek May as a whole other tier above the other quarterbacks, above JJ McCarthy and Penix? Because there is a contingent in DC that, hey, maybe we can trade back. Our roster isn't fully flushed out. We should develop and get more talent. So there is talk about going back. But do you think it's not a great strategy for Washington? What are your thoughts on that?
And it's going to be really interesting when we look back to see how Elliott Wolf in New England did it first year running the draft, and how Adam Peters in Washington ended up doing it. We've seen different approaches in free agency already. We've seen Washington do what I think is a really smart thing, which is get in these competitive sort of second contract guys, a couple of veterans to add some professionalism to the whole operation. But for the most part, it's the kid from Dallas, the pass rusher. I'm just blanking on his name. Lawrence Armstrong. Thank you. Frankie Louvu, guys like that, obviously. And the SIU safety from Carolina as well. I mean, just adding those kinds of players is really smart. I think that a lot of those contracts are going to be very valuable. New England spent most of its time re-signing people, less urgency maybe. I mean, yes, they've had priorities, but there's been way more rumors of a team like New England moving back than there has Washington. Again, I don't know what approach is right or wrong, but I'll be fascinated to see if New England does move back at 3, what they'd be passing up and what they're getting in return. They may get a ransom and it may look really good on paper, but if you're passing up a quarterback in a good QB class compared to what you kind of teased earlier, which is who knows what
next year
is going to be in a year, what Shadur is going to be in a year, what Quinn Ewers might look like. Bird in the hand, 2 in the bush, all that. I mean, that's going to be a sticking point at some point if they don't find that guy. So, I mean, I hear the whole call to like move back and add picks and everything, but I'd want to make sure that's great for if you're Arizona and you're fully behind Kyler Murray and you want to do that, great. If you're Chargers, I'm
hearing both of that. Chargers in Arizona is what I'm hearing. Yeah.
Bless. Yes. So it's different when you don't have that QB position figured out.
Makes sense.
How many tackles do you think go in the first round, Eric?
I think if I had to set the number right now, it's funny. I was asked this very same question previous show I just did. Offensive line total, I don't know if it wouldn't be 10. I mean, because you figure there might be a couple of centers like Graham Barton if you project him to either guard, center as opposed to tackle.
Which I've heard, Eric, a lot of people are doing that, right? Think he could be the best center in the draft.
Yep. And Jackson Powers Johnson, center guard, same thing. Those two guys, we'll put them to the side for a minute and let's just strictly talk tackles. I've got Joe Alt. I've got Talise Fuaga. I've got J.C. Latham. I think Troy Fatanu from Washington is a tackle. I'd try him there at least. If you want to make him a guard, great. But for argument's sake, let's call him my 4th tackle. Fashanu from Penn State.
He's going to tumble, isn't he?
He's what?
He's going to tumble.
I don't know that he'll go high. He was, if you looked at a mock draft in August, maybe he was going number 8 or 6 or 4 or whatever. If you watch his tape, you don't see a lot of like dog in him. I mean, I don't know if he's just one of those guys. Like, then again, Joe Thomas always made it look so easy, and not many athletes like him. But Fatanu is super light-footed, exceptionally gifted in pass pro, great mirror ability. I'd love to see somebody do a cut up of his run blocking and point out what he's doing. He's on the ground a lot. Like, that's the thing where I'm like Bill Parcells would have hated him. You know what I mean? Like, he would have taken him Amarius Mims, or he would have taken somebody like that before he took Fashanu. I think
Mims is a first rounder.
I think so.
I
think he and Guyton are both.
You think he can play either side, right or left?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Right.
I was going to ask about that too.
Probably start him at right and kind of see what he can handle, and then decide. I'm trying to think if there's been a player who really never played left tackle, and I'm sure there is, but left tackle in college, but ended up there eventually. Yeah, he's just an inexperienced guy, really like a ball of moldable clay, who's super gifted. But Anton Harrison last year was pretty good as a rookie. I know the Jags line wasn't great, but like he's better than that, I think. I mean, I think he's at least a little more talented. So
Guyton goes in the first round.
I don't know if there's another one after him.
Right. Jordan Morgan can play tackle to you.
Morgan could be. He's the only other one that I would maybe sneak in there. I like Jordan Morgan. He's a different football player than he was 2 years
outside
ago.
At tackle.
The length is like borderline. I mean, it's right at the edge of what most teams. I think he had. Was he 34-inch arms or 33 and a half? Maybe
it's right there,
somewhere right in that range. That's really like the cutoff, Right. Not that there haven't been good short arm tackles in the past. Michael Roos was the weirdest one. He was like 6'8", but he had short arms. So,
is there enough talent offensive line to pick one up in the second? Or they have so many picks this year. You jump back into the first round for either a tackle or a D end.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind it. Edge would be great too. I mean, again, it's one of those things where I'm sure once the dust is kind of settled and they've gotten to about the 18th or 20th pick, and they can kind of say, all right, there are still 3 offensive linemen on the board. There are still 3 receivers we like on the board, 3 pass rushers. 3. I'm just, off the top of my head. Yeah. But pass rush obviously makes sense too. And I'll just say I prefer, like, among the edge guys, I hear some of this kind of like, Dallas Turner is the 8th pick in the draft. Ooh, I don't know.
Atlanta. I'm hearing
Jared
that.
Verse at 11, like, ooh, it just seems a little rich for me. I like both players. I really do. But Chop Robinson, great workout. He's going to be gone in the top 20. Oof. To me, he's not a top 20 prospect. I just think he's just outside that. So,
and would you touch Latu?
Yeah,
he's one of the most gifted of the group, right? But it's like that medical is kind of scary.
It's a little bit like
he had to retire for a second.
Very similar profile to who's the Dolphins pass rusher they took from Miami University.
It's not Jalen Phillips right now. What is it?
Yeah. Jalen Phillips. There you go. Thank you.
Okay.
I've been having trouble with names, but it's the same thing all over again. Basically, he had the same situation essentially. Similar body types in some ways too. Thin legs, but like really athletic and bendy. I mean, Latu's tape is really good. Yes, he gets buried on some plays, but the next play he almost always comes back. The motor, the smarts, it's all there. I just feel like he's going to be a guy like a Ryan Kerrigan, like a gifted athlete who just finds his way to the ball and is you worry about the health cumulatively over time. And obviously, like you said, he was once medically retired, but from what I've understood, like the outlook on him medically has actually been pretty good.
Okay.
Eric, to that end, it seems like my question for you is this: what position group do you think is going to get pushed down into the second round? Because I feel like there's going to be a lot of quarterbacks to be taken early in the draft. The wide receiving class is deep, but they might also go hot and heavy early on in the draft with the Dunze and Neighbors and Harrison, a bunch of other players as well. Washington's a need for a tackle. Washington's a need for edge rusher, maybe even a cornerback as well. Do you see any of those positions?
For all of them.
We're for a lot of them. But are they going to be falling to like 36, 40? Like, I know the running back class, we can kind of shelve that. I know that's going to be more of a third round kind of perspective there. But like, could a cornerback fall, or like, what position group do you think is going to get pushed down in the first round because of the luck, the influx of tackles and quarterbacks and such?
Yeah, I still think those top either 3 or 4 receivers are going high one way or another. And I include, and like the more I talk to people, like A.D. Mitchell's going in the first round.
I like A.D. Mitchell.
Yeah. I mean, Brian Thomas is the top 20 pick, I think. So that's 5 right there, assuming obviously Harrison and Adunze and Neighbors are in the top, 6, 7, 8 picks, whatever. So, that's 5 in the top 20. I don't know that.
Is McConkey a first rounder or is he a second rounder?
Who was the name?
Lad McConkey.
Oh yeah, he could be. I wouldn't be shocked. I'm trying to think of a good, like athletically, his athletic profile, talking about analytics too. You know who he's most similar to? Garrett Wilson.
I can see that. Yeah. Wow, okay.
Just from the testing numbers,
he ran that 4.39. People were surprised. I wasn't.
I
thought he'd be a low 4.4 guy. That's what I thought. Like 4.43 is what I kind of thought he'd be. He plays fast. He changes gears. He's got a great skill set to be a number 2. A great complement to a star receiver, I think. Would I take a first round pick on that? I think I would, or at least,
Use plug and play.
25 to 45 range. That's
Right.
to me, sure, absolutely. So I think the receiver thing is it's a really deep class. So I can't really say that there. Maybe D tackle, because I think Byron Murphy's going fairly high. Like, I think he'll work into the top, 18, 20 picks and maybe sniff the top 10, somewhere in that range, 9 to 18 or something like that. But I don't think there's enough. Like Johnny Newton from Illinois hasn't, he wasn't able to work out at the combine, puts a lot of pressure on his pro day performance. I don't even know if he's actually had it yet, to be totally honest. But there's not that one, I could see somebody maybe freaking out over Tavondre Sweat and saying, we're going to make him our Jordan Davis. But boy, I don't know. I don't see a first round pick. Braden Fisk, nobody thought of him as a top 50 guy
until the combine.
Recently. Senior Bowl and combine have been huge for him. But I don't think there's quite enough to get him in. Maybe he's in that Brian Brzee area, but who knows? But I think, you look at Michael Hall from Ohio State, Mekhi Wingo, Mason Smith, Chris Jenkins, Rook Ororo from Clemson, Dwayne Carter, personal favorite from Duke. He's like a rolling ball of knives. I love that guy.
And those guys like 4th, 5th rounders, right? I mean, those guys are going to.
Some of them will go in the late 2nd. Some of them could sneak into the 5th. That's a position. Linebacker is maybe a little better than people think, but I don't. That's one you're going to have to be patient with. I don't think you're taking one. I mean, maybe Cooper goes in the top, goes in that early 2nd round range, and there's one or two on, But yeah, I mean, that's what how I would see it.
Is that going to become a trend as linebackers just kind of get shuffled and evolved in today's NFL, or how long? I guess you say that, and then the cycle will come back, right? And then
very cyclical.
Start getting linebackers again.
Eventually, I mean, obviously we're still kind of waiting for running back to get its fair share, or whatever. But yeah, I mean, linebackers become the next linebacker, safety, and I mean, there's a few positions that. They're still even above running back, but still aren't valued quite the same way salary wise and draft wise. So I think what's going to be interesting, you look at a guy like Peyton Wilson. I wish he didn't have the injury issues and the age issue, because he can do everything. Like, he is a full 4-down linebacker. You want him to stop the run on 1st and 2nd down, bam, he can do it. You want him to make a play out in the flat on a screen, he can do it. 3rd down, you want him dropping, he can do that, or he can rush the passer too. 4th down play in the kicking game, he can do that. It would be a great test for the value of the linebacker position if he didn't have a couple of these, like, age, injuries, short arms, because I don't even know that he's guaranteed to go, like, by the middle of the 3rd round. I don't know.
Well, okay.
Just saying, like, he's a really good football player and I think that has something to do with the positional value, but you're still seeing some linebackers, like the top couple of guys every year get paid in free agency. So I don't know.
You talked about, go ahead, real quick. I just want to positional value. Where do you think Brock Bowers ends up going? I know people thought he was going to go top 10. I think because people don't want to, that's a lot of money in the top 10. Now, listen, I'm a Georgia stan, so I appreciate Brock Bowers. Where do you think he actually ends up going, though? Top 10 or closer to 15?
Yeah, I was asking. I'll be writing something on him eventually, because he is a fascinating guy, and part of the story is how the NFL views that position. I thought Brandon Beane from the Bills, the GM, gave a really good answer when I asked about Dalton Kincaid. I mean, obviously there were some some drawbacks with him too. He accelerated from USD to Utah, hadn't played a ton of football, was a basketball guy. I said there were some risks baked in there. I said, how did you view him? Is there any bias against tight end, all that stuff? And his answer was, we were looking for a playmaker. If that happened to be a tight end, great. If that happened to be a receiver, great. We were going to use them in very similar ways, most likely. So their view was, I want a offensive playmaker, similar to how they looked at James Cook the year before, which is, as much of his skill being as a receiver that it is as a runner. And sorry, I was just getting a text that I've been waiting for a few hours. So yeah, I mean, basically the positional designation for Brock Bowers may be tight end, but you're going to see teams use him almost like a slot receiver, like the Bills did Kincaid. And I mean, I think it would be a crime if he lasted past the Colts at 15. I just couldn't imagine Chris Ballard passing on him in need of another guy to help Anthony Richardson out. And I would think, right now, before the Chargers make a trade down, assuming they do, I can't see a spot in the top 10 for him. I just can't. I guess the Jets would be the one team. Are they at 10 or 11? Where are they picking?
That's right.
Yeah,
10.
they're right there. I forget exactly where they're at, but Jets and Colts are the two teams that it makes some sense, but also the Chargers, depending on where they move to. So I think he goes top 15, especially after he, ran well and test or measured in better than, or he's going to run well and measured in bigger than some people expected.
Let's get out of this each episode the same way, Eric. Who do you think the Commanders take at number 2 overall?
Yeah, I'll take the risk and say Daniels, and I wouldn't hate the pick if it was. Like I think one of the things that came out of that previous show I did was like, the national media just hates the Commander. Like, dude, I've been saying for years that if this franchise won, it would do wonders for the locals. Obviously, but the NFL is a more interesting place when good football is in Washington D.C. Right? I live in Chicago. I don't even care about the Bears. I hope the Bears get good because again, they're a historic national brand. But that said, I wouldn't be shocked by either May or Daniels, even with this how I set it up. But I could see the receivers they have wanting to attack downfield, having a strong arm guy like him, and also having that athletic ability. Cliff could do some fun stuff with him. So I just have a feeling that might be it.
Eric, one last question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
What did you hear about Daniels in May from the combine, right? I think one thing we keep hearing about in DC is they want to instill leadership and maybe more of like a vocal leader from the quarterback position. I know Jaden Daniels kind of leads by example. He's more of a quiet leader. Have you kind of heard something similar from the combine? What did you hear about the interviews and regarding their leadership? Like, what have you heard about them?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't hear anything bad about either guy. I think you're right about that. I mean, Drake kind of comes off as more of an aw shucks kind of guy, and some of his post-game interviews are really funny because he's such an enthusiastic guy. He's like motivational speaker from the 80s. You know what I mean? Like
100%. I love that.
But a lot of people do gravitate towards that. Never heard a bad word. I mean, Mac was going on saying, I'm telling you, this kid is special. I will put my reputation on it. So there's a lot of heavy lifting in his corner for that. But for Daniels too, I mean, look, he faced a lot of adversity in 2020 at ASU. Like that program, really not his fault at all, had a million bad things going on at once. And he was in the center of it. Part of the reason why he left, and I don't blame him. He's seen a lot of stuff, right? And I think part of it is look at Lamar Jackson. I'm not comparing the two, like there is some overlap in their skill set, but Lamar's kind of a quiet kid. Far as I don't see him out there as yes, he gets into the moment. And I think I've seen Jaden on the sideline look animated and stuff like that, but Lamar doesn't do a whole lot of talking. You know what I mean? And it's kind of cool. Like it kind of has like a mystique about him a little bit. And I suspect there'll be some of that. One of the most interesting things of the combine was when Jaden said, I'm not working out here, but it's not for the reasons you guys think. It's because I want pro scouts to see some of my college teammates who are on the fringe, who are fighting for their life to get in, a foot in the door in the NFL. And I don't think I've ever heard that before. I thought that was a really cool thing. So if your quarterback is thinking about the long snapper and the fourth wide receiver and this guy and that guy, and they supposedly interact really well with all members of the staff at LSU, I'd feel pretty good about the leadership quotient.
All right, cool. Thank you.
It's interesting. I saw something similar about Caleb before we get out of here, that he was willing to play in the Holiday Bowl,
Yeah.
but that, the recruits from around the country were interested in coming through the portal to play for Lincoln Riley, and he wanted the backup to be able to get a shot at USC to get the starting job. And of course, he went out there and tore the thing up. So I think it's important what you said, Eric, is we don't always know all the reasons behind things.
Yep.
And it's easy to say, what a jerk, or he doesn't do it the right way, but we don't really know what's going on.
Yeah, there's so many elements to it. I can remember vividly early in my career talking to a college team, who I had some pretty good access to. I actually had some connections to, and I talked to two different people about the quarterback there. And the one was a salesman, like saying, "Oh, you're going to love this. This is great. This isn't what an NFL team wants." The other person said, "Here's what he's going to have to work through." That's what they started with. And it was like, oh. And so, some of this can be a PR campaign. Some of it can be a dog and pony show. Some of it can be absolutely real. And it depends on the delivery, how much you trust your sources, how public some of this stuff is. It's a tough puzzle to figure out, but that's what makes it so fun.
That is what makes it so fun. Eric, you're the best, buddy. We always enjoy it when you're on the show, man. So we appreciate you for sure.
Pleasure's mine, fellas. We'll talk to you real soon. And draft's almost here. We got to be ready.
Amazing.
All right. See you
Thanks,
guys.
buddy.